Well, welcome back to the Plan Your Federal Retirement podcast. I'm your host, Micah Shalansky, and with me is the legendary Floyd Shalansky. Pops, how are you doing, sir?
You know, son, I'm doing well.
Oh, look at those fans. They just absolutely love you. All right, I'm playing with sound effects. Sorry, how are you doing?
Yeah. I'm doing well, doing well. As you well know, I'm traveling a little bit, so if you hear the jets in the background, I'm not at an airport. It's where they're practicing the F-35s as the new students are learning to fly. So I call it the sound of freedom.
Hey, sound of freedom in the background is a great thing. No, you're traveling in your RV, which is fantastic. So I appreciate taking some time so we can talk about this. And actually, as I look out, so you're down in Arizona enjoying the beautiful weather. And as I look out my window right now, I have a moose eating some of our trees. So we got a little bit of the opposites going on.
Yes, sir. I just saw a road runner go past the road. So, yeah, extreme contradictions, you bet.
Well, Pops, one of the things that we wanted to talk about today was really jumping into retirement streams of income. And I know one of the things, there's some kind of misconceptions. We have our classic streams of income that I thought would be really fun to talk about, like pensions, right? And
Sure.
I know Tammy and I have talked about those a lot, how it works in the federal pension.
Yeah.
We've talked about Social Security. We've had some other Social Security experts on the podcast as well going through how this works. But there's other streams of income as well that clients sometimes want to talk about and bring to the table. So, maybe it's rental properties, maybe it's some other ones. So let's go through some kind of pros and cons. Now, as we're addressing this, I know one of the clients at one point in time came to me and says, well, Micah, she was a new client and she's referred to me by an existing client. She's like, Micah, I know you don't like rental properties, but I have 4. I was like, well, why do you think I don't like rental properties? They said, well, the comments we've heard from, this particular person is you don't like rentals. I was like, it's not that I don't like rental properties. It's that it's a tool, know how to use them when they're good and know the downsides of them. And sometimes I think we tell ourselves too rosy of a picture on rental properties or on anything. And I think it's important to look at that other side of the coin as well. What are the areas this can go wrong? But Pops, you come up with this with twice as much experience as I have, over 40 years in the business. So what are your thoughts on that?
The funny thing is, as you're saying that, I can remember clients telling me early on, Floyd, real estate never goes down in value until it does. In the 80s in Anchorage, Alaska, we watched the price of oil go from $30 or $40 a barrel down to $8, $10. And we watched real estate values just plummet back when you were in elementary school. Yeah. And the joke in Anchorage is you could buy a mansion on the hillside and get a free condo downtown because of the disparity in values, okay? Whether it's real estate, whether it's investments, whether it's pensions, it's all part of that financial puzzle that we take, and if you just want to be very simple with it, you got 4 pieces, 4 quarters, if you will, and I normally don't have a problem with real estate being one of the 4 quarters to do it. Just don't overload it. It's like our do-it-yourself stock jocks. They want to have everything in high-risk NASDAQ stocks. I'm okay with that as long as we don't overload it, because everything's great when it's spiraling up, but it's just quickly it can come down. So to your question, as long as it's balanced, I like real estate.
Yeah, so it's a piece of the pie, right? And on the comment on stocks, it was really important what Floyd said was that saying, hey, it's okay to have a piece of it, but not everything in that area, because now we're taking a lot of risk. And so now we can say, well, is this really the risk we should be taking? And we're talking about this in the context of retirement income, right? And one of the things that I'll tell you time and time again, our retirees like their income to be A, consistent, and B, increasing. They do not like having decreases in income. So we really got to look at that. So, the first piece of the pie, of course, is your federal pension. So there's other podcasts we talked about, on this podcast we talked about on earlier episodes, all about that. How do you calculate your pension? What's credible service? What are the rules for retirement, et cetera? And those are good things to go back and listen to. We talked about Social Security, and boy, it's not as simple, and Pops, maybe talk about this for just a couple minutes. It's not as simple, in my opinion, as saying 62, turn it on, FRA, which stands for your full retirement age, between 65 and 67, to turn it on. There's a lot of other things that come into this mix as well, right?
Oh, without a doubt. Last week we did an in-person seminar talking about Fed benefits. And one of the things that we do is we had estate planning, we had Cashflow, and we had Social Security as one of those 3 major leg stools for the first retirement, right? And typically we get 3, 4, 5 minutes and then no one asks questions. And we went on and on. What about this? What about this? Filing for Social Security is complicated, and it changes. The press says it's going to go bankrupt. The press says, oh, don't worry about it. File this, do that. And then you get the individuals go, oh, my goodness gracious. This is a major leg in that 3-stool retirement process. I better pay attention. Had one of the gentlemen come up and say, Floyd, I'm going to file at 62. How does it affect my spouse? I said, well, she takes a permanent reduction just like you. Mm-hmm. He goes, what? I says, yeah, you file at 62 and you're going to get in between a 25 and 30% permanent reduction. And she has to live with it. Even if. Now, if she delays filing against you until she reaches her full retirement age, okay, she gets 100% of your reduction. But if she files, you file at 62, she files at 62 to get her half of that, it's still an additional penalty. So yeah, it's not like check a block, let's do it. It's like you need to sit down with a competent advisor, walk through it to see longevity, and regrettably, if you have a disease that's going to take your life in a short period of time, different conversation. But statistically, we're going to live into our 70s and 80s. And I want your surviving spouse, male or female, to get the maximum benefits instead of giving up something because we're short-sighted.
And just to pull that thread a little bit, let's do a little more clarification for our listeners, Pops. What you're talking about there on a Social Security was that, husband and wife married. And so if the spouse in this case was not claiming on her own benefits, right? If what you elect only affects your benefits and then your potential, but it does affect your spouse's survivor benefits or your spouse's ability to claim on your benefits. So if you're both working this time and you both have relatively equal Social Security amounts, if you turn on your benefits, does not affect your spouse's Social Security benefits. The only thing it's going to affect is your spouse claims on your benefits, number one, or it's going to affect survivor benefits. That is, you pass away, what is she entitled to from the benefit standpoint? So really important to know these things. It's not just a you question, it's a survivor question. And then it's also an investment question as well, in my opinion. If we have Social Security and you take it early with a 30% penalty, man, that's pretty substantial. If we delay it and then every year past your full retirement age, it grows by a guaranteed 8% a year, man, that's a fantastic number of what could be increasing. So that's definitely something you need to go back and to look at. I think in episode 6, in episode 14, and then episode 27, by the way, just some quick numbers as to episodes we've gone into Social Security in depth. So again, on this podcast, we have multiple episodes where we talked about Social Security and going and claiming strategies, right? So know and understand these benefits is really important.
Mike, you just added one further step to that. Now imagine you retire at 62, your spouse is say 5 years younger, she hits 62 and you pass away. So she's she's going to take her Social Security at the same time. But if her cash flow is short and she has to go back to work, lo and behold, what do we have? We have an earnings cap, don't we? Currently at $21,600. If she has to earn more than that plus Social Security to live, now Social Security is going to claw back $2 for that, $1 for every $2 above that number, plus she has to pay taxes on it. So it's not just as simple as check the box, I want my money and I want it now.
Yeah, it's really important to know these issues, to know these things that are coming up, et cetera. And more importantly, know how it works for you. It's not about how it works for somebody else. It's about how it works for you. So actually on that note, let's transition a little bit, Pops, and let's talk about rental income, because I think it's a good one for us to talk about, because it's always not always, but it's a very frequent question that comes up is, should you have rental properties for retirement? So what's your and I think we're going to have some slightly different opinions, so this is going to be fun. So what's your 2 cents on that?
As you know, I happen like real estate has treated your mom and I exceptionally well, especially from the rental capacity. Whoa.
Okay. All right. We got some family drama we got to air apparently on this podcast. When Pops says real estate treated him very well, which is an accurate statement, I'm not detracting from that. What it meant was, as soon as my sister and I could start taking over and managing these properties, we would do that. So we would go over there and clean the properties. We'd go over there and collect rents. We'd go over and help with basic maintenance and things like this. So Pops, again, to your standpoint, real estate worked really well. We had a little bit of that child labor, which was coming coming in, which is great. Gave us a great educational background on this, but there's still a lot of maintenance in there. So anyways, yes, real estate should do well. Just a little bit of that family history for our listeners to know.
We won't go too deep into the history, okay? But when you you learned a lot, especially being an entrepreneur, how to do these things, right? Mm-hmm. But when you start thinking about it, I want to be a quote passive landlord. Well, the problem with passivity is that, the good thing about passive, you just turn it over to a real estate agent and they do all the work for you. Bad news is you have to pay for it. So in the past, the idea was if we could rent it and we could get cash flow to cover it, we would have the appreciation for our gain later on. Love the idea, but real estate's a two-edged sword. While you're working, you love to depreciate it. While you're working, you love to see it appreciate until you sell it. Then when you sell it, you got to pay capital gains. You buy it for 10, sell it for 20, $10 is taxed at a long-term capital gains, which is dynamite. But all that great depreciation you had to write off over those years to save you tax dollars, what do you have to do with it? Bring it back into ordinary income, all right? Tax planning, extremely important. We just talked about Social Security, tax planning, real estate, tax planning, all right? And this shouldn't be something you wake up one morning, and you watch one of the TV shows, I'm going to flip this house, or how I built my $1 million by, with real estate. It's great when you're 30 and 40 years old, but if you're retiring at 65 and 70, do you want to have 14 pieces of property to manage? Maybe you do. Maybe that's what your life is, and that's okay. But I know your mother says, we're not buying any more real estate because when I want to leave, I don't want to worry about someone taking care of it.
And that's a good progression, right? Sometimes we get clients in here that normally will say they have a rental property is great. A couple things we need to look at to make sure that they're a good deal. We'll talk about those in a second. But there's going to be a time in your life where you're just done with the hassle of rental property. Just like there's a time that you love working and you want to do it, then there's a time you're ready for the next chapter. That's the same with rental property. Does that make rental property bad? No. Know how it works. Know how it's a tool inside of the investment game. So here's some misconceptions that I think people bring into when they're talking about rental property. And Pops, feel free to push back on me on this. Number one, I like to say everybody can do addition, but nobody can do subtraction. So what does that mean?
I agree.
They come in and says, Micah, look at this property. Maybe it's an Airbnb property I'm going to buy for Hawaii. And it's going to make all this money. Or, I'm going to do Airbnb at this other place, or I'm going to buy a traditional rental property, right? They say, look, if I only rented it for X amount per month for 12 months, look at how much money this is. And they're doing the basic math correctly, but that's addition. They're adding up all the possible revenue they have. They're not doing subtraction, which is carving out all of the expenses that we're going to have with that property. Again, as I'm talking about this doesn't make it bad. Really understand how it works. So we got to pull out property management costs. We have to pull out maintenance costs. That's one of the things that a lot of times that I'm meeting people, they're not saving for. I want a separate account set up as a sinking fund for maintenance repairs, right? What about vacancies when they come up? What about all the utilities and things that you have to do? All of these things that are going to come up are really important. So if you're going to buy a rental property, one of the things I always recommend to my clients, especially if they're buying it from somebody else who has it as a rental as well, or is marketing it saying, hey, look at this, it's a great Airbnb property. I'm like, fantastic. Why don't you ask them for a copy of the last 2 years of their rental's tax return? That's right. Go ask them for their tax return. Why do I want to know this? Because no one overestimates their income to the IRS, right? And so now when we get their actual Schedule E or their potential LLC, depending on how it was structured, we get that tax return. Now we can go through it. And now I get to look at the net income number, not the gross income number. Just like in your paycheck, we don't care about the gross, we care about the net. How much is hitting your bank account every 2 weeks? That's the same thing we got to look at on a rental.
Mike, two things on that, right? We need to add legislation too, because so many times now I hear our clients talk about, I'm going to get this apartment in Hawaii, all right, I'm going to Airbnb it, and all of a sudden you and I know in Hawaii, they're really restricting temporary rentals. In fact, I think there's a couple units that's 90 days and one is 180 days for temporary. So that affects everything. And up until about 2 years ago, when my clients bought real estate in Hawaii, we ran it negative cash flow because every year they were coming out and have to put money into it because it didn't cash flow. It wasn't until right after the pandemic that all of a sudden everything, now we're flush again. which is great until airfares or inflation or a recession slows down traveling. And then all of a sudden you have a unit that is empty for a while. And then you have to make the payments. And if you're retired, it's not taken from your paycheck. It's reducing the amount of income that you have to maintain your lifestyle month to month. Very, very important. Cash flow and, again, tax planning.
So again, this goes back to, this doesn't make rentals bad. Know how they work and where they're going to come from. One of the things with a lot of Hawaiian rental properties, when I see them, as long as you can rent them for about 450 to 470 days a year, you're going to be just fine. Now, if you didn't catch that little joke, there's only 365 days in a year. So that generally means the cash flow doesn't work well. Now, sometimes my clients, and Pops, I know you're in the same thing, says, hey, I want a property in Hawaii, so I'm going to own one anyways. I might as well rent it out. Okay, now we're solving for something different. And the primary intent behind this is not saying, hey, I want to generate rental income. It's, hey, I'm buying the property anyway. I might as well rent it out when I'm not going to be there. Okay, again, I don't have an issue with that, but let's be really intentional. And now that comes from discretionary money, not investment money. What's the difference in these pools?
Oh,
right? Discretionary.
Very
go
important.
ahead.
No, you said investment, right? Yeah, see, and that's where so many people get confused with real estate. Because right now I'm working with a client, all right, that he's got a piece of property. We have $1 million of built up equity. What should he do? If he's put $200,000 in it and now it's worth $1 million, the return is exponential, pay the taxes, be done with it, right? But all of a sudden, Floyd, well, I kind of want to keep it. Why? It's sentimental. It's $1 million. Why is it sentimental? It's not an investment then, all right? And that's what we get confused with so many times, like a home, right? A home, I don't include a home as part of the investments in my clients' portfolios. Why? Because if it gets that expected rate of return, we're not selling it and moving it. So, I mean, understanding why we own something is just as important as the tax planning.
Yes, amen. It's super important, right? So again, back to that discretionary dollars versus investment dollars. If it's a sentimental thing, it's our discretionary dollars that's there. It's not investments. Therefore, do not take money out of your TSP and go put it in discretionary and think that, oh, eventually I'm going to have this money. Nope. There's the two categories we're going to separate those out on. Now, if the rental is an investment, well, then fantastic. We treat it like any other investment. That means it's a rules-based decisions. It has to be earning X amount of money in cash flow. It has to be appreciating by Y amount over a period, not just on a month to month, right? Over a period in time, it needs to be doing this. If it's doing its job, just like any other investment, fantastic. We want to keep this sucker for the long term. Working with a client, and when he came to us, he had about 6 rental properties. He's like, oh my gosh, look at this. They're just doing amazing. And he showed me all of their gross revenue that they were doing. And it was in the 6 figures. I mean, it was fantastic. So I said, well, that's fantastic. How much of that money are you keeping? He said, well, no, that's all my money. They paid to me and that's all my money. And I said, okay, great. So I opened up his tax return and we went to his Schedule E's, which is on his tax return. And he had losses for almost every single one of these properties. And I said, Bob, look at this. Every single one of these properties, you are coming up with losses. Now, some of that was depreciation, so we added that back in. Some of the properties were positive, some of them were consistently negative. And we started working on that analysis. And sure enough, out of his 6 properties, there was half that weren't making any money, but they were being subsidized by the other ones. We got rid of those half and we did something else. He bought one other rental. We had a little bit more investment, so he has 4, but now he has 4 that are profitable. Now he's actually making money on these. So this is really important to look at. Just because it's a rental with cash flow doesn't mean it's profitable.
You know, Mike is exactly right. All right. We take the emotions out. When you bring in an advisor, whether it's us or another competent advisor, they're going to look at it from, as you said, a rules base. 1 + 1 is 2, 2 minus 3 is, that's a negative number. All right. And I always love this. Floyd, don't worry about the depreciation. That's funny money. And I go, well, it's not funny money. You're going to think it's funny when the IRS says, pay me back. Mm-hmm. So again, bringing the emotions out of the equation and bring it back into reality. And that's what a good advisor should help everyone do. Look at the cash flow, stage the cash flow. It's like the income timeline that you and I talk so much about. Is at what stage of your life are you going to do X, Y, and Z? And I refer to them as turning points. You retire at 60. The first option is 62. Right, the next one is full retirement age, 66, and then maybe out to 70. When do we stage all of this? And how do you want to pass it on to the kids if you want to pass? Oh, do the children want your real estate headaches when you're gone? That's whole nother conversation.
It's a great conversation. So when we're thinking about this, if you're not familiar, if you're thinking about rental properties and you're not familiar with how depreciation works, a very basic concept of it, the IRS is loaning you some tax savings, but what do you have to do with loans? You have to pay them back. So a loan, so depreciation in this case is the IRS is loaning you some tax savings today, but later they're going to want that back. So it's really important to think about that when we go to sell the properties. It does catch a lot of people off guard. Does that make depreciation bad? No. Know how it works. No. Also, we don't have a choice. You have to take it. The IRS has pretty clear rules in that. Even if you don't take it, they treat it as if you did take it and have to pay it back. That's the worst type of loan, a loan you didn't get and you all have to pay back, right? That's not a great way to go. So be very careful with this.
Mike, I've had clients pay cash for real estate, run their own Schedule E, take zero depreciation.
Yep.
And then when they go to sell it, I don't have to worry about recapturing it, Floyd. I go, that's not what the IRS says. IRS says you have to go back and reamend or consider it as you did depreciate it that 10, 15 years anyway, whether you took it or not.
Really important to understand this. Again, rental's not bad. Know how it works. Know the upside, downside. If it's an investment, write down our rules, right? What are your investment rules that meet your retirement income? So, Pops, let's change topics a little bit. This one came in. We don't normally talk about it at all because we don't really recommend it, but it did come in from a listener to chat a little bit about on streams of income, and that's reverse mortgages. If you're not familiar with a reverse mortgage, so let's talk about it real quick and what it is. So a traditional mortgage, we know what that is, right? We want to buy a house. We go to a bank and say, hey, I'd like to buy a house. You got to put X amount of money down, and then you're going to spend the next 20 or 30 years repaying that loan with some interest. Pretty understandable. A reverse mortgage is where we get a lump sum, or more importantly, probably a monthly income out of our paid off house. So now we take a loan on it. We start getting money out on a monthly basis. And then when we die or we sell the property, that loan must be repaid. Now, reverse mortgages aren't necessarily a bad thing, but they're generally the last resort. They're generally the last thing that we would ever go to. But Pops, what's your opinion on those?
I agree with you 100%. In my 40 some odd years of doing this, I've recommended it once. And that client just wouldn't quit spending. All right. And we're going through the analogy, and here was the rub. He lived in a place where the property taxes is accelerated. So even by doing the reverse mortgage, almost 50% of what he thought he was going to get to spend, he had to reserve to put away just to pay property taxes.
Wow.
Then you've got your homeowner's insurance. So where he thought he was going to get maybe $1,500, $2,000 discretionary cash flow, he was getting $500. All right. And you know what? For the individuals, I get it. I kind of understand it. But what they don't think about is the surviving spouse or the kids that have to settle the estate. And I've waded in more than once on reverse mortgages when grandma and grandpa or mom and dad from one of our clients has had reverse mortgage. And how do we ferret that out? All right. And then I've watched kids come out of pocket, not to settle the mortgage, but now the house has to be sold. And it's incumbent upon whoever's inherited the home to sell the house to equalize to pay off the mortgage. And I've watched kids actually have to write a check. So if we're trying to balance out for families, it's just important to think not only for us, for your mom and I, but it's for you and Jamie and the rest of the kids, if we were to do that.
Yeah, let's talk about the coming out of pocket for a check, right? So the law is changed several years ago, a lot of years ago, that the the money from a reverse mortgage, the debt that's on there does not get passed on to the kids. Right. It ends at the house, right? So let's say you have a home with $500,000 and let's say the reverse mortgage is $600,000 that's on there. A lot of rules with it. I'm simplifying it, but let's say the house is upside down. The kids don't get that $100,000 debt. That's not what happens. But what does happen? There's cost to sell the home. You have to do maintenance. You got to do other things. You got to do these little repairs, right? Who's going to pay for that? Well, the estate should pay for that. But if there's no money in there, then the kids are going to step up and pay for it. But are they going to get the money back from the house? No, because there's no equity in the house. So while the debt does not transfer to the children, which is a great thing, right? The debt doesn't go down. There's still going to be expenses they're coming out of pocket for. So be careful with these and understand them. Two quick stories about it. One, same with me. I've never recommended a reverse mortgage, but I did tell the client, I said, hey, you got 1 year to fix your problem. Otherwise, the reverse mortgage is the only solution you're going to have. And that was a bit of a wake-up call. They were on a pretty bad path and just so sad because they were in such a good position and just massively overspending. And difficult times to be in when you're in that stage, and it takes a lot of work to come out of it. So we had to say, hey, look, if you don't stop this, the reverse mortgage is the only solution that's going to be here for you, and it's not a great deal. So that's one aspect of it. I did go to a class because whenever we have continuing education, like you, Pops, I like to take classes in things that I don't really know and fully understand.
Amen.
So I took one time for some continuing ed on reverse mortgage. And this guy came up and he was a professor and talking all about how great reverse mortgages are. I was like, holy moly, I can't believe this guy likes them so much. And he was doing all the math on it and showing everything. And his math on the board made a lot of sense. And I'm like, holy moly, I wonder if this really is a good planning tool. Really was kind of making me rethink some things. And he was saying this is back when the rates were really low. The rates are low. We could get locked into this low rate. You could do this mortgage. You could take the money out and do this other stuff. And let's say you could invest it in a fixed income investment that produces X amount of income. And I started to look at that math a little bit more. And I was like, wait, hold on a second. Where are you getting those numbers from on what you could invest it in? And he's like, well, I did the math and this is what you should get if you invest it. I said, whoa. What do you mean you should get? And he's like, well, this is what these companies should be paying you. And I'm like, well, what companies are paying you that? He's like, well, I don't know what any companies are paying right now because I'm a professor, but these are what they should pay you. I said, well, I'm going to stop you right there. There is no company out there that's paying those rates at all. And in fact, I just Googled it and you're not even in the ballpark of anything with these rates. And his comment was like, no, they should pay you this. I'm like, whoa, you're doing this whole presentation on theory and there's zero reality in it whatsoever. You got to be really careful of that to our listeners, right? There's theory about when we talk about some things and what you should do, then there's reality in how it works. Pops, just like you were saying, you could do a reverse mortgage and the reverse mortgage company could tell you, hey, this debt doesn't go anything to your kids. Your kids aren't going to have to pay anything out of pocket, which is in one statement true.
It's true.
But in another statement, in totality, when we look at the entire circumstances, it's not an accurate statement. Because what if there's final expenses? What if there's other things that come up in the house they have to pay for in order to sell the house? They might have to come out of pocket for it. So when we got to look at these things and really step back and look at that big picture, what position does it put you in?
You know, again, that's back to what we started with, understanding that income timeline. When you're going to have what? How's income going to come in? You know, and the joke that you and I use so much, tell me when you're going to die and I'll tell you exactly how much money you can spend. And it's that unknown out there of when we're going to get light beamed off the planet. So we have to do everything proportionately. Like, real estate. I'm cool with real estate, but not 100%. I love equities, but not 100%. I love cash, but not 100%. So we have to balance those out between the individual's wants and needs, whether it's just the two of them, whether they have to worry about taking and get aged parents, or they have kids or grandkids they want to take care of. How do we balance all that out? So very important.
I love it. All right, Pops. Well, this podcast is all about action items. So let's go into some action items that our listeners could take this week to help improve their position. So what do you think the first action item should be for them?
I'm always about, sitting down and writing down a spending plan, not a budget, but a spending plan. What does it cost you to maintain the lifestyle as you want? And don't tell me when I retire, I'm not going to do this, and this. Baloney. All right. I've done this for too long. The first 12, 18 months, your spending is going to go way up until it comes back down. So a spending plan. And if the real estate's part of the spending plan, that's cool. Turn it on Social Security. We'll have a conversation about it. Pull it down the TSP. We'll have a conversation about it. But understanding what you want to do, what it really costs you to retire. Not your neighbors, not your friends, not your cousin, not your uncle, but you and your spouse. What do you want to do? I think that's plan number one.
Yeah, and I would say those are two different things, right? What you're putting together. Number one is what's the spending plan, which I think is fantastic. Where's your money really going to go? And the second part of that, and I like them as two different exercises, what's your retirement income going to look like? What's that timeline for that next 10 years? Where's that money going to come from? How much is your pension? When does the supplement start? When are you planning on taking Social Security? What is the rental income going to be, et cetera? And make sure when you do this, you do subtraction as well, not just addition, right? We got to put subtraction in there as well. It's not your gross pension, it's your net pension, all of the deductions. It's not your gross Social Security, it's your net Social Security after your Medicare premium, after taxes. It's not your gross rental income, it's your net rental income. After all of these things come out, what's really left? And just have an honest conversation with where that money's going to come from. And when we do this with clients, it's such a great exercise to go through to make sure you're in a solid position. So know what that is.
No, you mentioned subtraction, and I'm sitting there thinking. I had a conversation with a client this morning. He says, Floyd, I know exactly what my Social Security is going to be. I go, okay, did you minus Part B? Well, no. Well, I got my check. Oh, yeah, they took it out. No, but we're good. All right. How much did they pay in income taxes? What do you mean? I've already paid tax on this Social Security. Yeah, but your income's over $50,000, married, filing jointly. So guess what? Now you have to pay taxes on it again. What? And they don't do the W-4V voluntary to have additional taxes withheld. So now it's April 15th today, and he's going, oh my God, Floyd, I need X amount of money because I didn't have anything taken out of my wife or my spouse's Social Security. So yeah, it's that negative. So even though we see what the FERS pension is going to be, minus taxes, minus FHEB, I'm going to turn on my Social Security, minus Part B if you're over 65, plus got to have taxes withheld. Got to do the subtraction as well.
Yeah. And does your state have state income tax on your Social Security? Not all states are created equal, right? So really understanding these things. All right. Last action item I'm going to throw out there for you. Try it before you retire. Now, I know this sounds a little funny, but in our ideal world, 12 to 24 months before retirement, we're getting everything set up as if you're retired. I was working with a client that wanted to retire. She's going to postpone her retirement a little bit. I said, hey, great news. We're going to still pick on your early date. We're going to get everything set up as if you were retired because I want you to try it out. I want you to see what works, what doesn't work. Let's get mentally and financially prepared for this next amazing chapter of your life.
And part of that is not your last brand new car, right? As I joke when I say that. But when you start talking about, that 2 to 3 years out in planning that you and I do, and we encourage everyone to do, when I have that conversation, the first thing I watch is, we're going to replace the car, we're going to replace this, so I don't have to worry about it when I retire. Okay, I kind of get that. But here's reality. You're always going to have a car payment.
Yep.
You're always going to want to have travel.
You should.
So let's, instead of replacing it, let's start that payment plan, build it into your spending plan as we go along. So important. The more we plan, the more we plot, the easier and the more successful the folks that you and I work with sail off into retirement.
I love it. Well, Pops, thanks again for joining me on the podcast. I know all of our listeners really appreciate it. If you need more information like this, you want to know how to take your benefits to the next level, then jump on our website, planyourfederalretirement.com. We're always looking to growing. We have a goal of helping another 1 million federal employees with their retirement, and that starts with you. So share this information, send it to a coworker. And until next time, happy planning.
Happy planning.